Have you ever thought about a single political office held by just one person that controlled an area bigger than France for almost 100 years? It's a pretty wild piece of history, and it all went down in northern Nigeria. So, we're going to dive into the story of the men who held this incredible power and see how their rule shaped the destiny of a nation.
You see, for 70 years, this massive region was run by one person who was, let's be real, basically a viceroy. We're not just talking about a governor here. This was a direct representative of the British Crown, with near absolute authority. It was a position of just immense power, shaping the lives of millions.
So the big question is, who were these men? In this explainer, we're going to walk through the whole line of succession, from the first British colonial officers to the Nigerian statesmen who took over, because really, their story is the story of northern Nigeria.
Okay, let's get the big picture. This office was created by Queen Victoria way back in 1897, and it lasted all the way to 1967. Get this, it even survived Nigerian independence for 7 years. Its 70-year lifespan saw the birth of Nigeria, the peak of the British Empire, the dawn of independence, and finally, its own end.
So let's start where it all began, with the guys who first set up British control in the region, the founding commissioners.
The very first person to hold the title of High Commissioner was the famous, or, depending on who you ask, infamous colonial administrator Sir Frederick Lagarde. He, along with men like Sir Percy Gerrard and Charles Temple, basically laid the entire groundwork for the British administration up north. They really set the stage for everything that came next.
And here's something really cool. You can actually trace the huge political shifts of the time just by looking at what they called the office. I know it sounds like boring paperwork, but each name change tells us something really important about how the British Empire and Nigeria were changing.
You can see the evolution right here. It went from High Commissioner at the very beginning all the way to Governor General in the last few years of British rule. This wasn't just them changing the letterhead. Each new title signaled a real shift in the relationship between the colony and the crown.
So here's the key difference. A High Commissioner was for running a protectorate, which basically means direct, top-down British control. But Governor General, that was a title used for a more established colony, one that had more of its own internal government. It perfectly shows that shift from just conquering a place to actually governing it.
Now, the middle decades saw this long line of British administrators come and go. You had lieutenant governors like Herbert Goldsmith, chief commissioners like Theodore Adams. These were the guys who managed this huge territory through some major global changes, really cementing the administrative structure that Lagarde had started.
And all of this builds up to the most important moment in this whole 70-year story, the transition from British colonial rulers to Nigerian leadership.
The very first hint of this massive change came in 1957, just 3 years before Nigeria's independence. For the first time ever, the power of this office, even just for a little while, was put into the hands of a Nigerian.
And that person was Sir Muhammadu Sanusi I. He was a really powerful traditional ruler who served as the acting governor for 6 months. Now, it wasn't a long time, but symbolically, it was a huge deal. It was a clear sign that the era of exclusive British rule was coming to an end.
And then, boom! Just 2 years after independence, the official handover finally happened. In 1962, the title of Governor of Northern Nigeria was formally passed from its very last British holder to its very first Nigerian one.
And right here, you see the two key players in that moment. You've got Sir Gawain Westray Bell, the last of the British governors, and Alhaji Sir Kashim Ibrahim, the first Nigerian to hold the job. This was it. This was the moment that the 62-year tradition of British rule in the North officially came to a close.
But the story doesn't stop there. The era of Nigerian rule over a unified North was going to be shockingly short. So now we turn to the final act, which saw the end of this powerful office and the end of the very region it governed.
After a military coup in 1966, the last person to ever hold this title was Hassan Usman Katsina. And this is important. He was a military governor, put there by a military government. It just shows another dramatic political shift was happening in Nigeria.
His time in office, and the office itself, would end on May 27, 1967, and it all came down to this number, 6. So what's so special about the number 6?
Well, 6 is the number of new states that the unified northern region was broken into. With just one decree, this huge political entity that had been governed by a single person for 70 years was just dissolved. And with it, the office of the governor, the viceroyalty was officially over. I mean, look at this chart. It puts the entire 70-year history into a really stark perspective, doesn't it? British rule makes up a staggering 88% of this office's entire existence. The time under Nigerian civilian and military rule, it was really just a brief final chapter before the whole system was taken apart.
So, the key takeaway here is pretty astonishing. An institution of incredible power, built up over 7 decades to define one of Africa's largest regions, disappeared almost overnight. It's a crazy reminder of how quickly even the most solid-seeming political structures can change.
And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. The office is gone, the unified region is gone, but how does that 70-year legacy, that history of being governed as one single massive block, still shape the politics, the culture, and the identity of all the different states that exist there today? Now that is something worth thinking about.